So the Karaites, we don't exactly know when they come into being, but one of their most, or at least articulate leaders, the leaders about which we know the most, which isn't very much, is a man named Anan ben David. And what I'd like to do now is to read just a short passage by Anan ben David so you can kind of understand the dynamics between the Karaites and the Rabbinites. He writes, "We say that these people, whose way is blameless, belong to the Karaite sect, who hold fast to the Lord's Torah, who abandon the commandment of the men learned by rote, who do not rely upon the Mishnah and the Talmud, the laws and the legends, which are full of erroneous statements contrary to the Lord's Torah." So what's Anan ben David saying here? The Karaites are devoted to Scripture. That is, what is actually written in the Torah, and some of the other books as well. But what they're against is the oral tradition, the oral Torah, that which is the foundation of the Mishnah and the Talmud and the entire Rabbinic halachic system that comes later. One way to refer to the Torah is the term mikra. Mikra has this Hebrew root kara, right, or koreh, which means kind of read, or really better to recite. It is that which is recited, the mikra, right, the scripture, which is yet another way to say that which is written scripture. The Quran, coming out of Arabic, right, is a term that really has the same root, right, kara, to it. It has the same kind of meaning, recitation. The Quran is that which is recited as the foundation of kind of Islamic, at the foundation of Islam. Karaites, same thing. These might even be, instead of saying Karaites, you may even translate that term as the scripturalists, those who put Qur'an, or Mikra, at the center of their religious life, and in fact make it exclusive authority, so they claim, to their religious life. They have a point. That's the first one, right? That is, if one claims that Jews are people of the book, and that term is actually an Islamic term to designate Jews, if they are people of the book, why is it that if you read the Torah and you look at actual Jewish practice, rabbinic practice, there's a giant gap. You would never get to rabbinic practice from reading the Torah. Because, in fact, rabbinic practice, the practice of Rabbinic Judaism, is determined to a great extent by the oral law, the oral tradition that comes through the Mishnah and the Talmud, and that also governs the way in which we read and interpret the books of the Torah. What the Karaites said is that that's all made up. These are just rabbis adding things, making things up, perverting the actual will of God. We all, the Karaites say, believe in the authority of the Torah, but you rabbinites have perverted that. It's worthwhile to consider for a minute the Islamic context in which this all occurred. So this is exactly the debate that was going on among Muslims in the Abbasid Empire, and it's actually a continuing debate that often goes on, which is the extent to which the Quran itself, see Quran again, that root kara, right, the written text, that is authoritative versus some kind of extra tradition on the side, which in the Arabic world known as the hadith, right? And to which, who wins, right? Not as if they are actually in conflict, because frequently they aren't, but do you actually have to live according to the hadith if the Quran is much more lenient or much more restrictive? So this was a giant debate among Muslim scholars at the time of the Geonim. And it seeped out into society. Because for almost everything that comes out of the Geonic period that's important and that's preserved really comes out of an Islamic environment. So it's no surprise, in fact, to see that the Karaites gain a great force as being the equivalent of Jewish reformers who are kind of working to purify Judaism and to make it, pristine and pure and according to the Torah, as they understood it. Now, it turns out, of course, the Karaites aren't pure. They can't be pure because one cannot actually live by the laws of the Torah alone. There has to be some form of interpretation. There has to be something extra in order to kind of make it workable, make a workable system out of it. So the Karaites made a very strong run against the rabbis for hundreds of years. And in fact, a lot of Karaite literature comes again from the Cairo Geniza. What's it doing in the Cairo Geniza? What that means is that the Karaites made it to Cairo, they lived there within the community, and in fact their stuff was included in the Geniza. So even the rabbis, even in the early Middle Ages in Egypt, hadn't yet fully won. There was not a full victory. In the end, of course, the Rabbinites, the Geonim, they do win. But it's not without a lot of heartache and a lot of polemics and a lot of use of their own power and authority, stamping this group down and labeling them as a kind of heresy. So it's this Islamic formation that kind of from which the Karaites emerge, against which the Rabbinites react, and it's exactly in that reaction to the Karaites that helps the Rabbinites to figure out what it is they actually believe. Because often it's in the face of adversity that we learn about ourselves.